O-G-E-T-S-Z.
Yes, that's how I should need to write it.
Is it the password problem?
It was instead of the Jackson, the O, it's not an O, it's a zero.
Ocon had a very good idea, and that was like, make the password simpler. I don't know why it's that, but he said he figured out already how to do it. So I would probably follow his advice. And I forgot to bring that up, so I'll try and remember that. You can't see. Is it too dark or is it your eyes?
I'll write that down.
All right. Alvaro, could you start us off? So, class 4. All you Bodhisattvas. Exciting. So tonight, we finally get to actually talk about some actual vows. But now you're in trouble, right? Because now you know. That's not true. Yeah, the good thing about tonight we're going to talk about the root vows, also known as the root downfalls, and we're going to cover half of them tonight, and we'll cover the other half the next class. They're called root vows, which isn't really that great of a translation, because root downfall is a better translation. In Tibetan, it's Zatun. Say Zatun.
Zatun.
Zatun, yeah. So Tza means root, and Tun means to fall down. So really, it translates better as root downfall. Root downfall. And what it really means is to commit a really, really serious mistake in your morality, in your Bodhisattva morality. And there are, as I said, 18 of those, but as you'll see, there's a lot more than 18, because each one of those has different sections, of course, because of the Buddhas. Right? So they're the most serious of the vows to break, and we're going to talk about why they are. If you commit a root downfall, so in a few classes we'll talk about how exactly that you do actually manage to pull off breaking a root downfall, and you should know that it's pretty hard to actually really perfectly break a root downfall. There has to be these certain elements in place. It pretty much means that you have to be like a sociopath or something to actually really break them. So if you're sitting in this room and you have the kind of heart that wants to take a Bodhisattva as a vow, I seriously, seriously doubt anybody is even going to come remotely close to actually breaking a root vow. Yeah. So if you actually manage to commit one of these root downfalls, you lose your vows, meaning that the vows are wiped from your mind stream. Now the good thing about the fact that they get wiped from your mind stream is the fact that you can take them again. You can actually renew them. But that shouldn't really be a solace for you because of the second reason. And the second reason is if you do indeed break a root downfall, it becomes impossible for you in this lifetime to achieve the first Bodhisattva bhumi. Now I'm sure that there are some people in this class who have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. And some do know what I'm talking about. So, because I know there's got to be somebody in here who knows what the first bhumi is, I've got to get out my mala. Let's consider the first Bodhisattva bhumi. The first Bodhisattva bhumi means when you have the wish for enlightenment. That's not what it means. The first Bodhisattva bhumi does not mean you have the wish for enlightenment. It means something else. You can't tell me what it is. Can't tell me. You cannot tell me what it is. You can tell me. Shut up!
So the first Bodhisattva bhumi when you realize after the direct perception of emptiness that as you're creating your causes for your world, you're working for future lives, for your own enlightenment and the enlightenment of the other beings.
Okay, so you're saying that the first Bodhisattva bhumi has something to do with seeing emptiness directly. Okay. So there's nothing else that is involved. So as soon as you see emptiness directly, you're on the first bhumi. Yeah, what you're saying, yeah? No, it's something else.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that there's another qualification. There's a certain way that you see emptiness directly. When you see emptiness directly, you don't have to have a certain kind of mind. You do have to have a certain kind of mind.
Yeah.
You can't tell me what it is.
Okay.
Sure.
So you have the wish for you to reach enlightenment and for all the beings to reach enlightenment, and as well your wisdom is sharp by deceptive reality. Your mind is
By deceptive reality.
no longer engaged and misperception.
Aha! All right. Okay. So, what Albert was saying is that in order to be on the first Bodhisattva bhumi, and a bhumi means a level or a ground, right? There's 10 of them. We talked a bit about this last class, but in order to actually reach the first Bodhisattva level, you have to see emptiness directly with bodhicitta in your mind stream. So you have to have the wish to be enlightened for the sake of every living being while you see emptiness directly. And if you remember, it has to be on your, painted on your mind first. Your mind has to have become a sponge for the wish beforehand, because you can't be wishing for all beings to become enlightened with your help while you're seeing emptiness directly, because you can't actually have any kind of cognitive sort of thought while you're seeing emptiness directly. So as soon as you come down from that experience, they would call you first bhumi. You have reached your first bhumi. You do like maybe you're one bhumi or something. The rapid becomes one bhumi. But so he's on the first bhumi. So now, if you happen to commit a root downfall, that you are disqualified from that, which basically disqualifies you from what? Enlightenment. Total enlightenment in this lifetime, right? So, it's a big deal, right? Yeah. So, in order to actually break one of these root valves, we'll go into it in great detail, you have to, you have to be happy that you did it, right? You have to not think it's wrong. You have to be willing to do it again. Right? You have to, think it's good to actually do it. And we'll get into it and you'll see why. You'll see why the chances are very unlikely that you break one of these. Another word for satsung is actually pamba. Say pamba?
Pamba.
Which means to be defeated by the enemy. To be defeated by your opponent. So who do you suppose the enemy is in this case? Yeah, what kind of fierce? Yeah, like that. Selfish, self-centered, yeah. Same, just the broader, you're saying some mental afflictions, but yeah, the broader, being defeated by your own mental afflictions, basically. So what about the good side? What about the positive side? How about keeping your balance? You may run into this over the years as you practice your Dharma, and you practice it with heart, and you follow your vows very sweetly. You'll run into some people that have been doing Dharma for a long time, and they really haven't had any good results. They feel a lot of discouragement. There's no magic happening in their lives. They're still having personal crises, about things. And some of these people will have learned, tantric stuff. They will have learned high tantric teachings, and they gobbled up all the words, right? But nothing is shining for them. Their world hasn't become anything special at all. That's from not following the vows. So at that point, the practice has no life for them. And you can imagine if you practice this for 20 years or 15 years and nothing has changed. You don't feel, if you've practiced this for a while and you don't feel your heart starting to break open, and you don't start feeling more empathy and more compassion and more love for other people, we don't start feeling more horror when you see suffering. And then if you don't start actually seeing a brighter world and start noticing very divine qualities in the people around you that you didn't notice before. But that doesn't start happening for you after like 15 years. You're going to start thinking that you're doing something wrong. And you probably are doing something wrong at that point. But if you keep your vows sweetly, if you keep your vows, you keep your mind on your vows, things will pop like popcorn. It will happen quickly. It will happen quickly. Your life will become unbelievable. Things that you can't imagine. And it makes sense that you can't imagine it. I look back at my own life 10 years ago, and I couldn't imagine it. I definitely had no idea. And even though I read lots of books and had lots of kind of ideas about them, maybe some fanciful kind of outer ideas, but if you think about it, you'll notice that this practice is a mental practice, right? Sure, they add in yoga later, or you're probably doing yoga, or there's other stuff that involves your subtle body later or even now, depending on who you are. But you've probably noticed it's all mental, right? So you're not building a physical paradise. If you're building a mental paradise. Everything that you're experiencing in your world has been brought on by something mental. It all started with something mental. So each day that goes by, that you're carefully watching your morality, specifically watching your vows, you're directly influencing your mind stream. So you're directly influencing your mental state, which is what eventually projects your paradise. So that's why you can't imagine it. Because how could a mind that is just not there, that is darkened by ignorance, possibly conceive of a world that is mentally free, right? And when you reach these kinds of places, that's what the joke is you realize that you never knew what you wanted from the start. You never knew what you wanted because you couldn't relate to what you wanted. So it's interesting. And so in the same way, if you keep your vows really well, you'll have amazing, beautiful experiences, and things will happen very fast for you. You will approach total enlightenment rapidly. And if you keep them like wishy-washy, you'll have like kind of a wishy-washy, world. It will be a wishy-washy appearance. And you can't get the higher teachings. Actually, you can't get the tantric teachings without doing the Bodhisattva vows well. I mean, you might be an official sort of card-carrying vow taker with all your lists of vows. That may get you into the door of the tantra, but it ain't gonna work. It won't work without actually taking this to heart. Yes, sir. Yeah, you got to walk your talk. Exactly. You got to be a walkie-talkie.
With strong batteries.
Right.
Fresh,
All right.
fresh batteries every day.
Fresh batteries, yeah. I'll tell you what the ultimate fresh battery is. That's Bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the battery. There ain't no other battery than Bodhicitta. If you have Bodhicitta soaring in your mind, nothing will stand in your way, and everything is easier. Everything's easier. Everything goes quicker. Everything's easier. Yeah. All right. First root vow. Here we go. Praising yourself or putting down other people. Praising ourselves or criticizing others. So now this just isn't just a general praising of yourself and putting down other people. There's a very specific kind of criticism and a very specific kind of praising yourself, and it is the motivation that is important. Okay? And the motivation has to be that you're after two kinds of things. You're trying to get some kind of material gain out of it, and you're trying to get some kind of fame. Yeah. So basically, it's like one motivation is, and this largely refers to Dharma practitioners. Between Dharma practitioners, it really specifically applies. Like if you're sitting in your teaching chair and you're going, yeah, you know, that guy down on Canby Street teaching about emptiness over there, he's kind of a crappy teacher. He doesn't really know what he's talking about, but I know what I'm talking about, right? That and then and your motivation would be like, so that the people in this room think I'm a better teacher, and so they give me some stuff. Like, yeah, John, you're a great emptiness teacher. Maybe you'd like a new car. You know, like some kind of hidden thing behind there, like going, yeah, give me stuff, right? And out of that motivation, you start slandering other people.
But it could even be over a job, like you want to get material gain. You want a job to talk down, make yourself look better, so they pick you for the job. That would be,
yeah, anything like that. Yeah, they use an example of a dharma, but it's anything like that, right? Yeah, and the other one is you want admiration. You're putting down some other teacher or some other person so that you'll get admiration.
So it's praising yourself while putting down others, or just praising yourself?
It's either or.
So like putting down others.
It's either or. You can break the vow. So this is where you'll find out, like, this is this is called one root vow, right? It's called praising yourself or criticizing others out of desire for material things or fame. But it's actually two vows. It's actually, like on your vow card, it'll read, praising ourselves for personal gain and criticizing others for personal gain. And yeah, that's actually two vows on when you get your vows. And personal gain, the personal gain part falls into two things. You either want material stuff or you want some kind of notoriety, right? Some fame. Like you want to walk into the room and have everybody like stand up and give you flowers and yes, here comes a special teacher, and right, and that's your motivation. Yeah. And you'll find that as you keep your vows, you'll have to do like what Don just did. I mean, you're not going to be in these kinds of situations very often. This is great for like a Dharma teacher, because one thing a Dharma teacher has to do is watch it for pride. You know, if you're like a prideful teacher with spiritual pride, well, you're in a bit of trouble there, right? And I think that every teacher, any sort of a teacher in any walk of life has to be responsible for that. And I would surmise that probably every single teacher goes through that in one way or the other, and they have to tackle it in their own way. Like, because generally we learn a lot when we teach, and a lot of the times I think the inspiration to teach is you're excited about the stuff that you're learning, and you're going to go through stuff. And the best thing to do is admit it to yourself. You write in the book that maybe the plus would be, yeah, I taught ACI 6 tonight. Maybe the minus would be like, I had a bit of pride. A bit of pride there. And then that's how you clean it up, right? And that's like if you're a yoga teacher or any kind of a teacher, Even if you see, this is the beautiful thing about the 6 Times book, because you can clean up your mind in a hurry if you passionately try to find concentric circles that are at least come close to the variation of the vow, right? So you could be like, okay, well, did I do anything in the last 24 hours out of a motivation to get something from somebody? Or did I do anything? Did I say anything to somebody? Was I at work and were people talking about somebody else? And did I jump right in to make myself feel better? And then you're not breaking a root vow. You're just kind of like flirting with maybe a secondary vow. But the process of going there is cleaning up your mind stream and creating your mental paradise. That's the vacuum cleaner. That's what it is. It's all that you're doing. It's really simple, and it's not bad or good or anything. It's just simple mechanics.
Yeah. So what about you as a teacher having pride in something your students accomplish? It's like you taught them, so you help somebody help themselves, and you get pride out of them. That's got to be it. Well,
you can have healthy pride. There's ignorant pride, and then there's like divine kind of pride, right? You can have a very healthy pride when your student does really well, right? As long as you don't sit there and go, because of me.
Oh yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well,
right?
It's internal. You keep it to yourself, right? You don't brag.
Right. Yeah, and like that. There's all kind of. Well, I think we'll get into this a little later today about a certain kind of pride or withholding. Oh, that's later. But it's like a teacher that withholds information so that they don't know it all, right? So they don't move too fast, right? Because as a teacher, your goal really is that the student actually passes you. If you're a great teacher, it'd be like, okay, I can't teach you anymore. Here, go to this greater teacher, or that's your motivation. And if you're a good teacher and you have walked the road of all the bloody anguish that it takes to actually become someone who can help someone else, all you want is your students' happiness. And that is all you want. And they come to you with all kinds of ailments, and because you have crossed that bridge already, you can help them, right? So, I would think generally if you're a teacher and you're messed up with prideful things and you're withholding, then you haven't done your work yet. You haven't crossed the bridge yet. You haven't really, done your work yet. But it's a process. So basically, the motivation has to be desire for those objects, some kind of attachment to those objects. So, and Jason Kappa talks here a little bit about, he wants to make a clarification, like, you're flirting with breaking the vow if you start to put down other teachers, right, or what they're teaching. But there's an exception to that rule in a way. If you know that there's someone teaching a harmful idea, for instance, right? Like a classic example is a bad teaching on emptiness, where the people end up walking out of the room thinking, well, nothing matters. It's all empty. I can do anything I want to because it's all empty. Or someone teaching tantric ideas that are dirty, that are not pure, that are like, oh yeah, we're in tantra now, we can just do anything now. Like that's a very, very unwholesome, nasty things to be teaching, and can get a lot of people in a lot of trouble. And quite frankly, if what the scriptures say is true, that's hell realm kind of destination stuff. And a lot of people have been hurt over the thousands of years, and which is why it's such a touchy thing. So, but if someone you know is teaching harmful things, then it is up to you. It is you're keeping every morality by going up to this teacher and saying, listen, I think what you're teaching is harmful. And then what you're supposed to do is offer them an open debate. You're supposed to say, well, okay, let's actually do a public debate. Let's talk about these things. And then you're supposed to say, now, okay, give me the scriptural authority, the source that says that. And then apparently, according to Geshe-Michael Roach, they won't be able to find them because there won't be one. Right? And now here's the thing. If you're going to do something like that, you have to be doing it out of love. You have to be doing it out of kindness for the person. And if for one moment that what you're doing starts to freak the other person out, or make them, you're supposed to back off. Right? See, in this case, you're not hoping to become more famous than the other person. Your sole motivation is to stop some harm that's being spilled into the world, like an oil spill. Right? It's like one of those tankers. It's spilling into the minds of beings, and we want to stop it. Yeah, so there can be no anger involved in that. You can pretend to be angry, and a good lama once in a while will pretend to be angry. So if you do have a lama, be prepared. Once in a while, you get the angry thing, and there's no lack of love. It's just something that you need. I'll give you an example. I was down a mountain. And my Lama Yvonne, who's in Pure Retreat right now, she's like my big-time teacher of yoga. And she had taught me lots of yoga, lots of Tibetan heart yoga, and I was going to go and teach Series 2 in the temple at Diamond Mountain. So, for me, that's like, in my mind, that was like me taking my guitar and going and playing at BC Place or something. I was like, okay, this is big time. I was really scared. There was going to be like maybe 80 or 50 or people in there, all like high Dharma practitioners, all major yogis. They're all well versed in all this stuff. I was really nervous. And Lama Yvonne was saying, she got me in there. She's like, no, he's been teaching this whole time. He can do this. So they put me on the roster, and I was so nervous. I kept getting, my mind kept getting jumbled up on this one idea, which was a certain kind of breath you were supposed to do in a certain pose. And I was like, Lama Yvonne, when they're doing the breath of the fireboat, are they actually doing Uddiyana Bandha, or are they doing the breath of fire? And she just looked at me, and she said to me, I gave you every, I'm going to swear it now, I gave you every fucking thing I had when I taught you that course. And you go in there and you teach that fucking class. Right? And and she had tears coming out of her eyes, right? And she said, I know it sounds mean, but it's not. That's just the way it is. Right? And I'll tell you, That snapped me out of my thing really quick, really fast. And I went and I taught that class, and behind me was this heat of just being like yelled at from her, which she never ever does, ever. She always treats me very, very sweetly. Always I'm on her little Johnny, right? That one time though. And I taught that class, and I actually gave a little teaching on the Wrath of the Lamb, and she was in the back of the class. And I didn't have there was no doubt in my mind that it wasn't out of love, right? So you may have to pull that on your students someday, so, and it'll come out, Yeah. So, yeah. Pretend anger's okay. So here's the thing. The vow is actually broken right at the moment the other person grasps what you're saying. Right? So you're sitting there talking yourself up or talking someone else down. You have to have that motivation. You want fame or you want material things. As soon as you perceive that that person has grasped the concept that you're trying to get across, you broke the vow. That's when it happens, right there. So it has to be a human being, right? That understands. And you don't break the vow if you tell your dog something. Right? You know, or your daughter that wouldn't understand or something, right? Like, yeah. So this is the thing. You can't call it breaking a root vow if there's any kind of charitable motivation in your heart. Right? If you get any kind of movement of love in your heart, any kind of caring for the other person in your heart, you can't call it breaking a root vow. So you break that root vow if you commit either one of those. Even though it's broken up in two, we're calling it one vow. And the reason why that they're counted as one vow in this case is because the motivation is the same. It's out of a desire for personal gain. Desire. So therefore they're classed as one root vow. Same motivation for two different activities. And that's going to be the same for the rest of the first four root vows. And that's actually because the first four are from a Sangha. Or so actually from Maitreya, you could say, because Maitreya dictated the Sangha. Or Sangha dictated from Maitreya. And the other 14 are from different sources. All right. Second vow. Not giving someone Dharma teachings or not giving someone material assistance. So, you'll notice that in these vows, what qualifies it as breaking a vow is often the other person, the person that is involved, right? And in this case, let's talk about the other person first. Let's say in the case of material assistance, okay? So, this person that you're not giving material assistance to must be genuinely suffering, okay? Something's really wrong. They don't have food. They have some kind of disease, or they have, they're totally out of money. And the second, that's one way that this person must be. The other way is that this person doesn't have any other means of support. They don't have a support system. They don't have, their family's not there for them. They don't have some kind of protector looking out for them, right? Which basically means you're it. They're coming to you and you are their last hope. And they're totally depending on you. And you know the difference. Now, it's important to know that you also need to be able to help. You know, you have to own the thing that they need in order for you to break the vow. Right? You have to be able to help. Now, in Buddhism, they say, like, for instance, they say that credit card debt, that's not yours. It's your debt. But if someone said to you, I need $100, you're the only one, and you don't have $100, but you have $100 in your credit card, that would qualify as that's not yours. Right? That's not yours. That's why they say, be careful with not going into more debt if you already have debt. Things like that. Or making offerings from your credit card and not paying it off every month. And things like that. You have to be really careful. But, yeah.
I was going to say, well, if you budget your money and you don't have a lot, you need money in the next week and you're not getting any more, and you have the money to give them, but it would affect you negatively, then you don't.
No, exactly. No, you don't. You don't. You make sure that you can eat.
Yeah.
Or whatever, right? Or you stay with the landlord, like whatever you need, right? And there are certain limitations too. Like, you're not supposed to give anything that would be harmful to them, right? If they come to you and they say, well, listen, you're the only one I can turn to, I need your pistol because I got to go kill that person, right? You're not going to do that. Right? Or they say, you're the only one that can give me this poison so I can kill myself. You're not going to do that. It's like common sense, really, but for some reason he's pointing it out. And weapons and poison are the two classic examples. And this is where we have to be careful, because it can be easy to be lazy with this. Like, for instance, if someone is coming to you and they do need some help, and maybe you just don't want to give them money. So in your mind you make this thing up like, oh, they're just going to go buy booze, right? But you don't really know that. You're just making that up, right? And so this is where the dance comes in. This is where keeping your book really well comes into play, because if you keep your book really well, you're on top of it, and you're like a watchdog on your mind, who was, maybe or maybe not, before you started doing the book, was like out of control, right? Out of control, unwatched, and causing you all kinds of future suffering. When you do your book, you're keeping your vows, and just constantly asking yourself, how am I thinking about this situation? Where is my heart in this situation? What was my motivation in this situation? If you constantly do that, you won't need the book after a while. You'll just know. You'll just know. And you'll be able to know right away, I just don't want to give the money. And you won't be able to hide it from yourself. And you go, okay, give them the money. And you give them the money, to beat that thought. You give them the money to give stinginess a punch in the face. And that's, right? Because you have to beat it. You have to beat it. So yeah, you have to be careful. Yeah.
About the poison,
Yes.
how do you define poison?
Well, this opens up a whole can of, lightning bugs. It's like, right? It takes a lot of wisdom, and it takes knowing your mind, and just, you have to weigh out the situation as best you can, right? And there's lots of examples of that, like, maybe you're a person who is a vegetarian, and maybe there's someone who needs to eat meat, and maybe you think it's poison. Like but the moral of the story is, you just have to be honest with what you're thinking, because that's the root. Yes.
I was going to say, I ran into a situation. I was waiting for the bus to pick up my daughter on a Saturday. I had money in my pocket, and this girl who I know was a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of places to get free food around there. They have it, they can go get it. And she was begging for money to eat and have a coffee. And she could have walked down the street and get a coffee. And I knew she was just collecting. Well, I assumed she was collecting money for drugs, right?
Yeah.
So I turned her down, and I said, no, I just don't have the money, because I don't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a person that I meet on the bus every week, because I go at the same time, and she was on the bus, and when we got to Olive Grove, I offered her a cup of coffee, and then I realized, well, geez, I just turned down this person, So I could have actually given her $2 for a cup of coffee, but I didn't, because of my assumption that I knew she was a drug addict. Because I used to be careful, and I know what they do. There's a place they can go and get coffee. There's a place they can eat 3 meals a day.
Yep.
Right? So would that be breaking the vow? Even though my reason was I didn't want to give it to her because I figured she would. The chances of her spending it on drugs were pretty high.
No, that wouldn't be breaking the vow, and I'll tell you why. Because your motivation wasn't. The motivation for not giving her the $2 wasn't because you didn't want to part with $2. It was for other reasons. Like, you genuinely thought, okay, she's gonna do it to get the drugs, and that was your genuine assumption. Maybe it may not have been true. And also, you're not the only person she could have went to. Right? There's lots of other, she's asking lots of people for money. You're not the only one she's asking for money. She didn't come to you and say, listen, Don, you're the last, you're the last Coca-Cola in the desert. Like that. But it would have been different though, if you would have just had this thought of like, I ain't giving you $2. It's my $2. I want my $2. So I will not give that to you. Right? That's very different than what you're saying.
Well, anyway, it bothered me for a while.
Yeah. Those situations are bothersome.
It was when I realized that here I offered this person a cup of coffee, but I wouldn't get it for her. So maybe I didn't really need that $2 because I told her that I can't afford it.
Well, you gotta tell her something. Right?
I don't like to lie though.
Yeah.
In my mind, I can't afford it. I'm taking my daughter, but then. So it was because I didn't want to give her money, really.
Right.
And I just justified it by saying, well, she could go get a coffee over here, and, and she's a drug addict. I know she's saving up to buy herself drugs. She was stolen all the time.
Right. So, right, it's a little tricky. So you're saying that maybe it was out of stinginess.
Yeah, because sometimes I'll just give them. I'll give them anyway.
Right. So maybe your motivation was stinginess. Either way, though, you're still, God, that's not breaking a root downfall because you didn't, you had a small moment of not giving somebody an opportunity. Because
She could have
I think if you in your heart would have thought to yourself, wow, I am really seriously the only person that can help this person get some food, I doubt that you would have withheld $20.
I would have bought them. I've done that before.
Right.
I've taken people and bought them because they're worried they spend on drugs. So I won't buy them food and save them money.
Right? So I think the trouble that we get into, and what causes a lot of anguish in our lives a lot of times, is that we don't know. Right? We don't know. It's too vague. There's too many variables. There's just too many. And that's part of the human samsaric condition, is that we just don't know. And that's what these vows are for, is to try and give us some kind of way of at least trying to live in a way where we know at least what our motivation is. Because if you are indeed in samsara, you can't go through a day without killing something. You can't walk on the grass without killing something. You can't start your car without doing some damage. You can't, there is nothing, you cannot go through a day, a 24-hour period in this life without doing someone else, some other being, some kind of damage. Right? And if you think about it, you'll see that it's true. That is a projection.
So now
That can be fixed.
How critical do you have to be? Like, you have a fly in your house and you have the strip hanging there that collects the bugs. And you gotta take down the strip and just try and shoo the flies out the door? Is that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just do your best. Hi. Hello.
A couple of years ago, I worked with two groups. I yeah, sex fertilizing.
Oh.
It's a children's trial.
Oh, yeah.
Boys are us.
Yeah.
And I never had to harm a one. It was just sucking and get a feeling and put the stopper and
Oh, that's great.
out my window.
Very good. That's great. Yeah, because flies are so fast.
Well, I mean, I think I got up to 100 one day.
Wow.
Well, over 2 days period, and I don't know whether you got me, but now it's
Yeah.
yeah, so you don't have to have fly strips. I used to just kind of live with them and push them out, but now I can collect them all.
Yeah. I think fly strips are particularly nasty. They're like, it's like torture, right?
Yeah.
They're like hanging there and they get stuck there and they're like, I mean, it's really nasty, but it's better. Yeah.
So what if you use that to feed your pet spider?
Well, so now, okay, we're way on it. Right?
We'll drop
Yeah,
it.
you have to just have to do your best. Or you're stepping on it. You're one of those. You're one or the other. Right? Okay. So the mental affliction in this case is attachment. So remember, there's two divisions here, right? There was the material things, and then there's the Dharma. We never mentioned the Dharma yet. And the Dharma is pretty simple. It's basically, actually I mentioned it earlier, right? You're not teaching the Dharma because you're attached to what you know. In other words, you don't want to teach someone everything you know because you're afraid that you won't be so great anymore. Suddenly they don't need you anymore. Suddenly everybody knows what you know and you're not so special.
What about if you will teach one person but not somebody else to do this life and now do the same person? Like
That's a different motivation. So that's also I think it's such a different vow because the motivation's different. But yeah, out of anger, motivations out of anger is a different kind of karma. Similar but different karma. So we've got two vows: not to give the Dharma and not to give material things. Out of possessiveness. Vow number 3. So again, we're going to have two vows. In this vow, okay? So the first part of this vow is when you strike another person. Now the root text says you actually use your own body to strike them, or you throw something at them, you swing something at them, or you imprison them, or you put them, or you do some kind of real physical violence to them. Very specific. And this has to be motivated out of some stewing anger that's been stewing for a while, and finally it pops, and you just lash out and you actually strike them. This vow is pointing at that moment, the actual moment when the anger pops, and you actually act out on it. We're not talking about the initial flaring of the anger. They don't even say how long that you hold the anger. They're just saying that it's a stewing kind of a thing, and then bam, it comes out and you do something harmful. And it has to be a human being. You know, striking an animal is evil, but to specifically lose your Bodhisattva vows, you have to actually put a human being. And this can be someone who's keeping the morality or not keeping the morality. This can be a good person or a bad person, quote unquote. It's just the fact that you held some anger and then you let them have it. And if you've ever done that, I'm sure that you know how horrible it feels when it does indeed take place. So the second half of that vow number 3 is refusing to accept an apology. So it makes sense, right? It's a stewing anger thing. So someone did something to you a while back, and you're just stewing over it, and you just keep fascinating about it. You're fantasizing about what they did, and you're really angry, and then they finally come up to you, and in a very nice way. The important thing is that they actually do come to you in a sincere way to apologize for this thing that they have done, and you just refuse to accept it. You know, no, you're just a jerk, and you did it on purpose, and I will be mad at you forever now. And you hold it, and you hold it. Yes.
I'm having a little, I understand all of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just having, I'm getting stuck on the wording of these are root vows.
Yeah.
I don't see a vow as something I would want to do, like.
You know what? I'll tell you. It's interesting that you say that. It's a vow. A vow is something that you vow not to do, and a pledge is something that you vow to do.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, so thank you. So vow not to do these, but then you break the vow, goes further, and then I'm confused again.
So it's like, okay, put it this way. You vow, so the first one, say this one. You vow, you're making a vow not to fail to accept an apology. Or you could say, I am pledging to accept an apology. Right? I pledge that I will accept an apology when someone comes to me and they mean it, and I was stewing over it, and yes, I'll accept their apology. You're making that pledge. Or you're vowing to not do the opposite. So you're, right?
Okay. All right, I understand. I'm pretty close there.
Okay.
All right, and then you say, here it says, you break this, to break this vow, they have to sincerely want to apologize. So, is the wording I'm getting stuck with? I understand that you're not supposed to withhold your anger, and of course we want to accept the apologies, but it's just the wording that's in the
Where do you look up that? Let's use an example.
Okay. Can you give me an example? Okay.
Or I can make up an example, or...
Well, let's go back to that. I understand that you would not want to do these things. It's just the wording I'm giving, the semantics I'm giving.
Okay, so say someone talks behind your back, right? And then you hear about it.
Okay.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I never. And then you're like that for a good week, and all you see is their face, and you're like, oh, how could they do that to me? Like they're such a. And then they come up to you and they say, Leonardo, the other day I was talking to somebody, and your name came up, and I said this thing about you, and I'm just, I shouldn't have. I'm so sorry. I didn't, I'm thinking about it now, and I'm such a jerk, and I'm so sorry, And then you just go, I don't care. You're a jerk. You shouldn't have done that. I'm angry at you, and I will stay angry at you. And I hope you suffer. Right? You just broke your vow.
I just broke the vow.
Yeah. You just broke the vow of refusing. You just refused to accept a heartfelt apology. You just refused to accept an apology. So you broke the root downfall of not accepting an apology. Yeah.
Can you see how it sometimes is getting...
Yeah.
I understand. I just broke the vow by refusing to accept an apology.
Yeah.
I do understand.
Because you're vowing not to accept an apology. Double on. You get it every time.
I explained everything. Okay. Thank you. That brings more light. Thank you.
Right? So the essence of the vow here is, of breaking the vow, is when you refuse to accept, right? You refuse to listen. Right? You just refuse to let them explain themselves to you, or something like that, or even if they do, and you just refuse. So you break the third root vow if from this held anger, from the motivation of this held anger, you either strike another person or refuse to accept an apology. And the main mental affliction here is malice.
Oh.
You want to hurt someone. The desire is to hurt someone. Right? You want to hurt their feelings with your anger. Right? You're hoping that they get your anger and suffer. So it's pretty nasty. Right? It's nasty.
So what if you think someone's doing it to you?
What do you mean? Say that again? What if you think someone's doing what to you?
What do you think if someone's doing this to you? I have apologized to somebody and then
Oh.
so I think it's...
Yeah, well then I guess you better accept people's apologies then in the future.
That was like 3 lifetimes ago. Okay.
Yeah, it has a cause.
Thank you. Oh,
All right. let's do another vow for the break. This is, again, one vow but breaks into two. Giving up the greater way or teaching false dharma. Giving up the greater way or teaching false dharma. So giving up the greater way means giving up which teachings? We have the, right, Mahayana
Hinayana.
teachings. Right, Hinayana is Mahayana is the greater way. So, which means the way to give it up, the way to give up the Mahayana teachings in this case is to put them down. Is to actually put them down. And meaning you can put down either one of the two great divisions of Mahayana teaching. No one here can tell me what the two divisions of Mahayana teachings are, because there are no two divisions of Mahayana teaching. Two wings of the bird to reach enlightenment. And but specifically, pardon? Bodhisattva life? Yeah, exactly. Method and wisdom. Method and wisdom. Yeah. So basically, the great divisions are the teachings on emptiness and the teachings on how to act as a bodhisattva, right? The merit. You're acting like a bodhisattva to collect the merit that you need, and you're studying emptiness to get the wisdom that you need. So the way that you put it down is you say, the Buddha never taught that, it's all rubbish. It's silly, it's no good, it doesn't help. You know, I don't believe the Buddha ever said that. Now, the other one is called teaching false dharma. What do you think that is? Teaching false dharma.
You gave an example of a bad teacher that just either teaches it wrong so that the students learn improperly.
Yeah.
Like the emptiness, for example.
That's a good example.
Understand the emptiness.
That's a good example. That's a good example. There's another example that's a little bit trickier, a little bit closer to our own heart in a way.
To prolong motivation?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I think the motivation would have to be a little bit sideways there. Right. You don't. If you change the teaching a little bit, right? To suit your thing, right? All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, well, this is like my dharma. You know?
Couldn't you say, and this is how I...
Yes.
You do
Yeah. I'll get
teaching,
to that right now.
and then
Yeah.
say,
There is a definite difference here. So I'm just going to say initially what's important. Initially, what's important is it's like that. These teachings have been passed on for thousands of years, right? And they work and they function. They don't need to be changed, right? They've spit out enlightened beings. It actually works. And if you change it a little bit, you take that like with grapevine over 100 so years, it's changed a lot. I don't know if anybody here's ever done any like bricklaying or anything like that. If you don't get the first course right, I remember I was on this one job and there's just these stupid wavy bricks that we had to lay down as paving stones. And if they start to go a little weird, they'll be off a little bit, but by the time you get 40 rows out, they're way off. Right? It starts off small and it gets worse and worse and worse as you get further away from the source. Right? Like that. So don't add anything. But to Leonardo's point, this is very true. But you can be giving a teaching, and you can say, well, this is kind of like my interpretation of this. This is how I found it works for me. If I'm doing something like that, I will like specifically, I'll say, well, no one ever taught me this. You know, this wasn't in the scriptures. My teacher never taught me this, but this is my experience or of this thing. And I'll say that. Then that's okay, as long as it's within the parameters of the true teaching. Because the Vinaya, I think the last lines of the Vinaya even say, in future generations, you're going to have to teach this in a way that fits the time. But do not dilute the ideas. Stay with the mainframe, right? And then they work. They will work. Yeah.
Does motivation have anything to do with it, or is it just through ignorance?
I think that it could be both. It makes sense to me that you could be doing that. You could do that out of ignorance. Yeah, for sure. But I don't think out of ignorance that you could break a root vow. I don't think that could be the cause of you. It would be more like you think it would be cool and that you should update Buddhism.
You know better.
Yeah, which is different, right? Different motivation.
An element of pride.
Yeah, an element of pride for sure.
The ignorance to think that you could actually, your way is better than the teachings that work. Isn't that true? Ignorance?
Pardon? Sorry?
The ignorance that you think that your changes in it make it better, and it's not out of pride, it's out of the fact that you think your way is better, so it's out of ignorance.
I would agree. So I think what we can say, there would have to be some pride in there, but also there must be ignorance. There must be ignorance. Because if you truly knew that, if you had the wisdom and you knew, then you wouldn't change it, right?
Then it would be a different affliction. It would be a different root vow. It would be more like lying about something.
Yeah. And I would say then that pride has to be in there. Yeah, it has to be in there. But let's just see what he says, because maybe the main mental affliction is actually ignorance. Yeah, no, I think you're right. It is actually the main mental affliction is ignorance. Nice.
Just looking at the notes here, and so that you must know that you made a reluctance of ignorance.
Yeah, fine.
Well, there's four things to it. It's ignorance that you don't realize that the true teaching is the right way. You think your way is better, so it's ignorance of not understanding the right path.
Right.
And you're smart enough to make up all these things, and you think that they're better because you don't understand it properly, so that's why it's ignorance. That's what I get.
I think that it makes sense to me that it's ignorance. Actually, it does make sense to me that it's ignorance. Because
You know that you made it up. You like the idea. You teach it to others,
Right.
saying that it is the real Buddhism, and they accept it. So you're thinking your way is better than the way, so you're changing the thing. It's not out of, it's out of ignorance of the fact that you don't understand the teachings yourself properly to think that you could come up with something better, right? It would be like somebody taking the Bible and rewriting it and say, oh, this is God's word.
I think that the trouble we're getting into here is defining what ignorance is here, right? Because ignorance means a lot of things. right?
Lacking knowledge and understanding, has nothing to do with,
Yeah, well, in Buddhism though, no, in Buddhism ignorance means a couple things, right? In Buddhism ignorance, ignorance in Buddhism just means that you don't,
you weren't
that
taught
you,
it properly.
that you think things are coming from out there.
Well, exactly,
Right?
because ignorance actually
Right.
has nothing to do with intelligence. Somebody is ignorant about living in the woods because they've never been there, nobody ever taught them and trained them. So his ignorance is the fact that he didn't understand the vows, the morals and values and the vows properly to be able to teach it. He changed them thinking that this is better because he didn't understand them to begin with. And he didn't understand what he was doing it all totally, because in his mind he thinks it's better.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I think that we just have to go to, you know, if you had been studying Buddhism long enough to be sitting in front of a class and teaching, what would make you do that? Right? And there's got to be some kind of ignorance involved. So anyway, we're going to call it ignorance. Yeah. Let's take a break.
Can you cover that whole vow?